start the meeting, can I just remind members to mute your microphone when not speaking and only speak when invited. If you wish to speak or ask questions, can you please indicate so in the chat room? And also remember that we are being broadcast live. So if we could start with apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any apologies for absence, but for those viewing the YouTube webcast, currently we have 10 of the 13 panel members online, without councillors Chown, Smurden and Sweet. Thank you, Chair. Okay, thank you. We could then move on to item 2 of the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of February, which seems to have been in another world. We need to approve the minutes as a correct record. Are there any members who do not approve the minutes as a correct record? No. Do I take it then that as and when the opportunity arises, I will sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of February? I presume that I have the authority to do that, unless a member indicates otherwise. Okay. Next, urgent...
Chairman,
yes.
Councillor Pennington.
Yes, Councillor Pennington.
Can I just, before we go on any further, I'd like to make a proposal for consideration sometime, and that is, now that the lockdown is virtually nearly over, in all intents and purposes, I just wonder whether or not we can consider meeting as normal and not in a democratic way like we always used to do for our next meeting, which is on the 24th of September. Can we take that into account and just meet as we always did in a normal democratic way?
Councillor Pennington, I'm sorry, but that item
will that be considered?
Councillor Pennington, I'm sorry, but that item is not on the agenda. I think
it's not. You see, we're back again to non-democratic procedure because of all this. And all I'm saying is, can it be considered for the next meeting? And then we're meeting normally like we always did.
I'm sure that members of the executive are taking on board what you said, but it's not on the agenda for today's meeting. So thank you, Councillor Pennington. Next is urgent business. There is no urgent business. Next, division of the agenda. There is at item 9 on the agenda an exempt report. I suggest that we deal with whether or not there's a need to divide the agenda when we reach item 9. Does any member have any objection to that? No. Declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Does any member wish to declare an interest? No. Next is public forum. I understand there are no questions lodged in advance of the meeting. Is that correct, Darryl?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. So moving on to the executive forward plan, I requested that a member of the executive or give a update as to the position concerning the formation of a wholly owned company. It doesn't appear on the forward plan. Councillor Baston, am I right in thinking this is your domain?
It is, but I've had no notification of that whatsoever, Chairman.
Oh, I put in a, well, are you able to, I put in a request at the beginning of the week that the executive member responsible give an update on the position concerning the formation of the wholly owned company. I think it's quite obviously tied in with the housing strategy. If you're
Chairman, it's Mr. Molyneux here. Isabel Blake can give an update on that, if that's okay with the lead member.
Yes, that's fine.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Bastow?
Fine, yeah.
Good morning, members. Yes, there isn't really much of an update other than we have sought some legal advice on how we will structure that company. We're having a officer meeting about some of the formalities around how we go about doing that actually tomorrow. So it might be possible to come back with a more fuller update at the next ONS if that would be helpful.
Okay. Yes, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Do any members have a question on this particular item? No. Okay. The next item under Executive Forward Plan is the Homelessness Strategy Action Plan, which is 7A on the agenda. I think, Councillor Baston, would you like to introduce the report?
Yes, will do, Chairman. And firstly, I apologise for the breakdown in the communication, but that communication from yourself regarding the wholly owned company certainly didn't reach me. Introduction to the Homeless Strategy Action Plan for 2021. Members are today asked to recommend that the Executive adopts the implementation of our 4th annual Homeless Strategy Action Plan, and this is for the current year, which is 2020-21. The report includes a review of the 2019-20 Action Plan, which identifies some significant achievements. Notable achievements include the prevention of 348 households from becoming homeless in the South Hams, with officers achieving a successful outcome in over 81% of their cases. As you are all aware, this year has brought with it some unprecedented events which will impact heavily on our residents and our communities. Members will note the ongoing prevention following a focused approach to our action plan, which has been developed to respond flexibly to changing needs, monitoring and responding to these changes, whilst at the same time recognising and meeting the pre-existing needs of our communities. Now, Chairman, you did send me in advance, and I did receive these, some queries regarding the action plan. I'm going to introduce, I could answer them myself, but I'm going to introduce Sophie Cobbledick, who is responsible for the report, and I'm sure she'll speak in a softer tone than myself. Sophie will now provide you with that information on the homemaker contract and how it works, the Seymour letting scheme, the housing first model, and also some information on Appendix 4, which is Young Devon. So I'll introduce Sophie now, who will run through those items for you, and then we'll take any questions after that. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baston.
Good morning, everybody. So covering the first query that we received relating to the homemaker contract, just some background advice on what they are and how they what they do and how they work. Homemaker offer bespoke, tailored advice to individuals and households who are referred into the service. They work with customers to address issues around income maximisation, so making sure that their claims are accurate and every bit of income that they are entitled to is being claimed. They also work to resolve debt issues and support customers through the process of applying for debt relief orders and the like. In addition to this, they will also an absolute font of knowledge for what funding is around for charitable help with people to meet sort of short-term one-off needs. So they've worked with a lot of our customers to help them sort of get funding for carpets, for new tenancies, that sort of things. The contract with Homemaker has been in place for the last 2 years. We've seen some excellent outcomes from it, as you can see from the report. This year, due to the COVID situation, we used some of the funding that Devon County gave us for welfare support to increase the size of their contract, so that they're also taking referrals from our environmental health team, who are managing things like the debt relief and the financial hardship calls. I think I've got it, Steve. So, Councillor Hawkins, have you got a comment on specifically on the homemaker contract?
No, on the homeless strategy altogether, but that's
okay. So if I finish the first four, then if anybody's got a specific one, do yell if it's to do with what I've just spoken about. But I'll cover the first four off first, and then go to the rest of the questions afterwards. So the next one was around the Seymour lettings setup. The Seymour team are working really hard to ensure that rent arrears are kept to a minimal level. That's also demonstrated in the report. We're a small team. We've got around 60 properties that we are managing. During the COVID crisis, when all the hotels were closed, we also entered into an agreement whereby we took on an HMO, which is a house of multiple occupation, to offer some emergency housing beds for where we would normally have used a hotel or a travel lodge. Everything's being managed really well at the moment. We are also going to be involved in the Housing First project in terms of some of that management and some of the delivery of support that will come from the rest of the team. With the establishment of the housing company that was mentioned earlier, we're also going to be looking into provision of things like specialist housing for people with learning difficulties or additional needs, and management of any residential assets that we own or invest in over the years. We're hoping with that we can be slightly more flexible about meeting genuine need in the community, rather than sort of just standard housing. So actually introducing some of the things like the DFG, the Disabled Facility Grants, to making sure that we have access to some adapted housing as well. So that's the Seymour lettings covered off a little bit. The Housing First model was the other query that came up. It's a project that we've been very much committed to, and we have committed to working with Live West on delivering 4 properties over the next 2 years. The initial model that we entered into with Live West was around Live West managing tenancy and us managing the support, which meant that it carried very minimal cost implications for us, because they handled the voids, any void times, any sort of repairs. The people going in knew who their landlord was from day one. The idea with Housing First is that they go in on a lesser degree of security under the introductory tenancy, and that they have fairly intensive support going in with them. These are people who have very chaotic lifestyles, lots of additional needs, and actually sometimes need that extra help from a support worker to make sure they're accessing that support, to make sure that a tenancy is manageable for them. So the idea is that the support would go in, and that once they demonstrated they were working well and they were managing their tenancy well, at that point Live West would then offer them a secure tenancy, and that would become their home for life. The optimal outcome that you want is that we then gradually withdraw the support as they don't need it, and sort of in theory, hopefully they never hear from us again, and they carry on to manage their lives as tenants of Live West. The reality is probably that we will dip in and out and always maintain that strong contact with Live West, so that any problems that do start to arise, that we can get in there quite quickly to support with those. The advent of the COVID-19 restrictions on evictions has meant that we are now currently looking at a slightly different model, which would possibly involve us leasing the property, so that we take on responsibility for the rent, and we take on responsibility for the placement and eviction of those tenants, because we have greater powers of eviction than a social housing provider. The idea behind Housing First is that you don't evict people unless you absolutely have to, but at the same time we are placing people into properties surrounded by other people who have a right to have some level of peace and enjoyment of their own home. So it is necessary that we have that ability to remove people should they start to cause significant problems or fail to engage with us. We are looking at that as an option. We're looking at very short-term leases to give people time to prove themselves, and we have been given some funding to meet those costs as well. I have a couple of questions that actually relate to the Seymour lettings. Do you want me to cover that now?
Sophie, if you finish your
yeah, just keep going,
and then we'll go to the questions
okay.
in the chat room. If you complete your presentation,
so
then we'll
just
go.
the last fact question that Councillor Birch raised when he contacted us was around the Appendix 4, the Young Devon Work in Schools. In terms of the success of that project, it's been exceptional this year. It's taken a little while to get the team that we've been working with into some of the schools, because school timetables are obviously very very pressured. So we've had a variety of deliveries. We've had full house assemblies reaching sort of 200 to 300 people at a time. We've had smaller groups, and they've also been given the opportunity to speak to the advisors afterwards as well. The purpose of the project really is to make sure that all of that cohort of children, so that we're talking sort of 15, 16-year-olds, know what homelessness looks like, how it can impact on people, and where they can go if they have any queries or any concerns, or if they're experiencing any difficulties at home. It's really difficult to quantify the actual direct impact of a scheme like that, as particularly in the early days. What you would hope to see is that we'd see much more early contact. So rather than people coming to us at the point that their parents have asked them to leave, that perhaps they contact us at the point that that their relationship with their parents is starting to break down, and we can get into those situations earlier to help with those relationship breakdowns and actually prevent that homelessness. As I say, that we're talking 15 to 16-year-olds, so likelihood is we may not hear from any of them. We may hear from some of them over the next couple of years, but it's really important that both those young people and the school staff understand that there are people out there that can help with that early intervention and make sure that those referrals come through to us. So that's my summary of the points that were raised.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you and your team for all the good work you're doing. It really is appreciated.
Thank you.
What I'll do is I'll go down the list in the chat room, starting with Councillor Hawkins. You say you had a comment. Councillor Hawkins?
My comment was just to thank Sophie and Izzy for all the hard work and effort they do on this for us. Whenever I've contacted them, they've always contacted the person who I needed assistance for within a few hours, and the issues that they've been having and suffering have been resolved through them. And I just think we're very lucky to have Sophie and Izzy working for us in the South Hams. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Next I have a question from Councillor Jackson. How many residential assets do South Hams own? Are any of them not in the South Hams? Sophie, could you deal with that, please?
That's a good question, and off the top of my head I can't remember exactly. It's under 10, and none of them are outside of the South Hams. We have we've identified a number of properties out of our asset list that were not fit for purpose. So we had 2 properties opposite Follerton House, that very, very large properties, very difficult to heat, very difficult to maintain, and needed quite a lot of work doing to them. So and we had a similar situation with one in Dartmouth so we have chosen to dispose of those assets. That money is ring fenced now to invest in further affordable housing provision within the South Hams. But in terms of the number of assets we own at the moment, I think it's about 6, but if you leave it with me, I will find the spreadsheet that they're all on and I will count them.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie.
Sorry, Councillor Mackay. You have a question.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, first to reiterate what Jonathan just said, and
the fantastic work that's going on. I mean, I'm always deeply impressed whenever you make this a presentation as to what's going on, especially the Youth Devon and the Housing First. My question is, other than via the route that Jonathan just outlined, where he actually phones you and refers a person in, what is the normal mechanism whereby people are picked up and drawn into the Housing First projects?
So in terms of the normal route that sort of an everyday family who've received notice, that sort of thing, would come in, we get referrals from multiple agencies. The government actually imposed a duty for those agencies to refer into us. So we do get external agencies referring in when they're aware of problems. We make sure we keep ourselves fairly high profile with all of the agencies. So CAB will advise people to contact us and will refer in themselves as well. So the voluntary sector is very much there on supporting us. In terms of Housing First is specifically for rough sleepers who have very chaotic lifestyles, who would struggle to maintain a tenancy in any other situation. So you're talking about fairly small numbers. We receive referrals for those people from all of those people I've just mentioned, so mental health services, GPs, voluntary organisations. In addition to that, though, we have outreach workers who actually, one in particular, who actually, treads the streets looking for people to try to get their engagement, and that's one of the interesting parts of our work, which Steph Rickson leads on actually, and she can give you probably a much better explanation of the project. The work that goes on at that point is very intensive engagement with people who often are very suspicious of councils.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor O'Callaghan, you wanted to
Thank you very much. Yeah, just a couple of things. Just wondering, firstly, how many people you're helping and how much, if you could just clarify how much it's increased during this crisis period. And also, my second question looks like it's pretty similar to Peter Smurden's. How is COVID going to impact on your ability to provide services? I think in the report you say you can confirm that good progress has been made on actions for the year. Certain elements have been hampered by the pandemic. So I just wondered if you could just give us a bit more detail on that. Sophie?
So what's been interesting from the outset, we all sort of hunkered down and expected a large number of problems to come through, but actually because the evictions were prevented and because everybody was sort of locked down, our number of people coming to us actually fell. However, what did go up was the number of people who came out of the woodwork who had been sofa surfing and suddenly they couldn't move between places or had been rough sleeping and needed to come inside. So we've seen quite a significant increase on our caseloads of single people who have been in sort of less secure situations. We haven't yet seen the huge spike in people fleeing domestic abuse that we expected. I think that hasn't been the case in other areas in the country, but certainly we've had one or two, but we haven't seen the huge spike of relationship breakdowns that we expected. However, I think it was 2 weeks ago that it suddenly started to increase. I think it was that after that weekend of the 5th when things started to open up, and I think that's when people started to think, right, actually now I can start looking forward to my life, and do I want to be here? What do I want my life to look like? My children are doing my head in, so my 17-year-old, I'm going to ask him to leave. So we got a mini spike there. What we've seen as well is an increase in people who are having their mental health impacted on it. So people who are very anxious already, actually finding that it's quite difficult for them to manage the process of going to find accommodation. That's been quite difficult. Our team, I can honestly say, have done remarkable work with the people who have been in the accommodation in terms of actually managing somehow to get them housed, even though we weren't allowed to go walk into lettings agents and things. So I mean that's real testimony to the relationships they had with the letting agents, that meant that they could ring those people and say, because this person has a housing need, they are permitted to move. So the government guidance said that you can only move if you have to. So that meant that we could move people, but that people like myself couldn't just decide to move. So it has been managed very, very effectively, and they have really achieved. There are a couple of things that have been held up. The Housing First programme is one of them, because of the difficulties with with accessing accommodation. Some of that has been around the fact that because people haven't been able to move out, there haven't been the number of vacancies coming up. So that has stunted a few things. But really, I think the big concern for us for the future is the effect on people's mental health and the relationship breakdowns. That's where we're perceiving that there will be high levels. The other aspect of it is the financial hardship, which again we expected to see very quickly, but because of all the sort of safety nets that the government put in place, didn't happen at the time that we were expecting it, and now we're expecting it sort of moving forward. We've seen a couple of cases of redundancy which have happened very recently. A friend of mine was made redundant sort of last week and had been following that whole period of furlough. So I think that is something we are going to see more of. The other real pressure point, I think, is going to be we don't have portfolio landlords as a rule in our area. So we have landlords who often by chance have inherited a property, for example, or have a property as sort of almost a backup to their pension, and they suddenly are possibly going to be in a position where they might need to sell a property, and then that will put pressure on people. The DHP pot, the discretionary housing payment pot, is very well funded at the moment, and so we are looking to try and make sure that we're targeting those people with top ups to their rent, things like that, to try and keep them buoyant as long as we can, and look at their options moving forward, either finding further employment if that's part of the problem, or finding more affordable property. But yeah, I imagine that it's going to be an issue. We've had some funding from the government to address our rough sleeper cohort. We've had that funding for about 18 months. The government recently released some additional advice around how they want us to use that funding, because with the advent of COVID, the advice was to get as many rough sleepers in as would come in. Once they're in, the government don't want us just to go, all right, COVID's over now, you can all go out again. So they would, which is something that we wouldn't do. We would try to work with those people to move them on, but actually that's quite an expensive exercise. So the fact that they've allowed us to repurpose the funding that we had to pay for support staff who will directly target that cohort to get them moved on, and to develop the sort of the Housing First project further as well is going to be a big help.
Thank you, Sophie. The next is a question from Councillor Smurden, which I think it's in the chat room, yes. The chat box. Can I just, coupled with that, is we are considering, or we're being asked to recommend that the executive adopt the strategy action plan for the forthcoming year. So coupled with Councillor Smurden's question, and bearing in mind that there is the possibility of substantial unemployment, people being unable to pay their mortgages, faced with eviction, there's also the possibility of rent arrears, etc. Is this actually built into the plan to deal with these possible circumstances that are going to arise?
So we've had some additional funding for rough sleepers specifically for the accommodation costs that we will have incurred. We got an extra £1,600 to help towards those accommodation costs. As I said, the rough sleeper initiative funding was we were permitted to restructure that so that we could target the support where we wanted it to go, rather than continuing to do lots of outreach that didn't necessarily support the people moving on. As I've mentioned, we've got our discretionary housing payment pot is looking fairly healthy at the moment, and so we're looking to use that as creatively as possible as well. And there are lots and lots of bids opportunities that will be coming up and coming through. I think that we've had some hints as to resource for that, but we haven't had sort of final figures or anything. So we are looking to make some applications for as and when those applications become live. The additional posts for those rough sleeper for the rough sleeper cohort are grant funded, so they are likely to the funding is due to end on the 31st of March. They are likely to reconfigure what sort of funding is available, and we will be looking at how we can creatively use that to respond to current need.
Thank you. Councillor Sweet, you have a question.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thanks Sophie and Izzy and Steph and Jill. It's an amazing team we've got in South Hams, and a couple of the things I was going to ask you've covered through your presentation and through the other questions, but just wanted to echo what amazing work you guys are doing, and it's also always so thorough and so joined up. There's just one thing we did discuss this when we chatted a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, thanks Sophie and Izzy and Steph and Jill. It's an amazing team we've got in South Hams. And voice echoing back over.
Sorry.
Whilst you've covered through your presentation and through the other questions. And
Councillor Austin, you've got you're not muted.
Is that what it is? I'm echoing back on myself.
No, it's okay. It's okay now. Try again.
Yeah, so we chatted about the other street navigator post. Has that been filled yet?
And that's Steph's project, so I will hand over to Steph, who will give you a blow by blow on that one.
Okay, thanks, Sophie.
Hi, Councillor Sweet, it's Steph here.
Hi.
When we were looking at the repurposing of the Rough Sleeper Initiative funding, which was the funding that paid for the 2 outreach posts, we made the decision that the refocusing on Move On rather than just on outreach meant that we would blend the 2 posts together. So we would now have a part outreach worker and part Move On officer who will be filling that role. So they will be doing outreach with Jill, doing building those relationships, doing that work, but also focusing quite strongly on moving on rough sleepers that are in temporary accommodation, or in a perfect world, managing to house them straight from the street into accommodation. So that role won't be identical to Jill's existing post that I know you're quite familiar with, but it will exist, but in a lesser form, focusing on that Move On element.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So that person is, because I think last time you said it wasn't quite settled yet, but that's sort of imminent, is it, that role?
Yeah, we have now confirmed Lisa Festerazzi in that post.
Oh, okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Thomas, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not actually sure now that I look at it whether it's Appendix 2 or Appendix 3, but it's certainly HSU 7/RS for rough sleeper.
Appendix 3, I think.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It was simply a question on, in the light of everything that Sophie said about the ever-changing situation, I note that the rough sleeper estimates are going to be conducted on a quarterly basis, and I just wanted to ask, is that because that's standard practice? Is that because that meets officer capacity, or is that because that's what you believe is most efficient? I'm just thinking that, every 3 months is quite a long period of time to actually be doing the estimates, and a lot can happen in 3 months.
Are you happy for me to take that, Soph?
Would you like to answer that?
Yeah. Okay, so what we have we have an ongoing knowledge of the number of rough sleepers that we have out there. So we do outreach work normally, at least once a week, often 2 or 3 times a week. So we track the number of rough sleepers that we have out at any one time, and it's something that we monitor very closely. It's more really in reporting in practical terms. So it wouldn't be practical to do a weekly or bi-weekly report on the number of rough sleepers. Partially because the situation with rough sleepers is often quite fluid. So week on week, it can sometimes look like, when 1 week it may look, particularly in high season, so in summer, it can look as though we've got 9 rough sleepers out in a week, for example, whereas actually this week that number's gone back down to 2. So when we look at it over a longer period of time, it allows us to get a much more detailed picture of the wider view, so that we have an idea of what the real numbers are rather than those fluctuating figures all the time.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks for the clarification. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
Councillor Mackay.
Oh God, he's come back.
I understand at the moment it's not possible to do any evictions. That provision is going to be removed at some point. Are you anticipating a spike in issues when that happens?
I believe yeah, the short answer is yes. There are evictions that we are aware of, certainly with the social landlords, that have been on hold for a period and will just automatically recommence. So that it is envisaged that will happen. However, a lot of landlords a lot of private sector landlords have not issued notice at all. So the change in the restriction didn't prevent you from issuing notice, it prevented you from acting on that notice. So but many landlords just didn't issue the notice at all. So as and when we see notices come through, there may be opportunity for us to identify ways to resolve those issues. So if those issues were to do with rent arrears due to changes in income, things like that, that we may be able to get in there to prevent that from needing to progress. But yes, there is potential for a sort of a spike.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members, for your questions and comments. The recommendation is on the screen. I'd like to propose the recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chairman.
Right, good. Okay. Is there any member not prepared to accept the recommendation and do other than rather than us go around each and every member of the panel? Is there any member who would like me to put it to the vote? No.
Chairman, I was just wondering whether as a lot of other members this morning have expressed their thanks and admiration for the work of this housing team, is there any way that we can encapsulate those thanks formally in adding another line to the recommendation, or
yes, let us add to the recommendation that the panel thanks the team, the Homeless Strategy Action Plan team, for putting together an excellent report and for all the hard work they do. Would be satisfactory?
Happy with that.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Baston, you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to sum up, and I think my words have been taken away from me, but I think Councillor Sweet said it all when she said what an amazing team they are. And they are an amazing team, and they have been for a great number of years. I've been involved with this team for many, many years, and they have always worked successfully and worked in a proper manner and given this council of ours a really good reputation on homelessness. So yes, I endorse everything that everybody has said, and the proposal to add a thank you at the end is very nice from members and appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Baston. Thank you. I think we all agree with you. So, Darryl, can we take it that this recommendation is passed?
Thank you, Chair. I've just monitored the conversation bar on the left-hand side, and there seems to be no member not willing to accept the recommendation with the addition as well. So there'll be two parts to it. Part one as per the screen, and part two being that the panel thank the team for putting together an excellent report and for all their hard work. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks. So if we could now move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the Waste Services update. Councillor Baldry.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members of the panel. Good morning, other members, and good morning, officers. I shall just make my way very slowly to the front of the room, so I can take my place at the front of the room. And beside me, as you will see, I have got Jane Savage and Natalie Johnson, who are going to assist me. Members, you've seen the papers with a fairly lengthy presentation included in it. That was the presentation which would have been given, I think, last Wednesday if that members' meeting had taken place. That didn't take place. Rest assured, I am not going to go through slide by slide in the whole presentation. I'm just going to try and pick out some important points, if that's all right, Chairman.
Yes, I think there's no need to go through the presentation page by page because members have had sufficient opportunity to read the document. So if you could pick out the key points, please.
I should pick out a few key points, and I certainly rely on members who have read the papers before. As you would have seen, the supply chain during COVID-19 meant we weren't able to implement as planned at the beginning of, in the middle of September. We are now proposing to introduce the new service in March, and we are confident that the final delivery dates for the delivery of the fleets and containers will take place so that we can have the launch date in March. A round review is planned to take place in September, and we are formulating policies around household container storage, recycling, collection from schools, etc. As you will have seen. Onto the slides. As members need to be involved in this because this is going to mean major changes to recycling collection. We also want members to be aware of the changes in the arrangements and also of the communications package. You will have seen in the papers, Chairman and members, that there is an additional cost of, we think, slightly over £200,000 because of the delay in implementation. This is a direct result of COVID, and it is included in our claims to government for reimbursement for the costs of COVID. The policies are, there is a slide which member will see on policies, which will be like changing the containers. We consulted the waste working group, they agreed to that, and the other changes are going to the waste partnership board, which meets next week. I don't know if either Jane or Natalie want to say anything about the policies at this stage.
Jane, do you wish to say anything? I think that's a no.
No, I'm just trying to start my video there.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take these through. So there's the policy on private lanes that's already been agreed by council about 3 years ago, but we will be implementing it more now. The schools recycling collection, currently we collect a lot of recycling and some refuse from some schools. So we need to really trim that down a little bit at the moment. So the majority of school waste, if it's over and above what we would normally be expecting to collect from domestic properties, then we would push across to trade waste, which is in line with most other councils. And then the third policy is about storage of containers. So that's the next slide. I don't know if we can get the next slide up there. No? Okay. Well, the next slide anyway is about the storage of containers. So we've got a lot of properties in the South Hams which open out straight onto the road rather than a pavement. So we have to make sure we've got some policies around there, what we expect from households and what they can expect from us. So they will be going through the partnership board next week.
Thank you, Jane. Members happy with that? Any questions on policies?
So, Councillor Rose, you have a question.
Sorry, this isn't directly related to policies. Should I ask it now or at the end of the presentation?
Joseph, could you wait to the end? Would you mind?
Yeah, that's fine. No hurry.
Right.
Councillor Baldwin, would you like to complete your presentation? Then we'll open it up for questions and comments.
Yeah, indeed. Good idea. The interesting slide, I think, for members is the one that's headed Weekly Recycling and Food Waste, and it has the box in if they find it in their own papers or if it can come on the screen, where it shows the way in which we are going to divide up in future, and it shows a big increase in the items which we are going to collect for recycling. I don't know if you want to put any flesh on those bones, Jane.
Well, I will mention, is this an appropriate time to talk about the question from Councillor Reeve, which was about plastics?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So the question was, why aren't we collecting clear plastic bottles at the moment, and what difference will the new service make? We collect all plastic bottles at the moment, clear and coloured plastic bottles. So anything that's bottle shaped, made of plastic, we are collecting at the moment. But the new service has been developed so that we can collect the vast majority of recycling that members of the public want us to recycle, that we can recycle, i.e. we can find the markets for, and we can recycle efficiently. So in the new service, we will be collecting plastic bottles along with plastic pots, tubs, trays and printer cartridges. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, as you request, I'll take Councillor Pannell's question at the end. Is that all right?
Yeah, if you complete the presentation, yes.
Right. We can come back if any members have got any questions on the breakdown we're going to do in future. But if you move on a couple of slides, which shows what we're going to collect over weeks 1 and week 2, which says alternate weekly collections. Garden waste into the brown bin. A decision will have to be taken at some time whether we're going to charge for garden waste, but at the moment it is council policy. We don't charge for it. So in week 1 we will collect the garden waste in the brown bins as at present, and in week 2 we will collect the non-recyclable waste. Anything on that? We're happy with that. And now if Natalie could then go through, please, what I think is very important for members, which is the communication strategy.
Yeah, sorry, just taking myself off mute. So we've got quite a comprehensive communication strategy because it is vitally important that that everyone knows exactly what's going on before things start happening. So I've just broken it down into mediums. So online, obviously, we'll be doing a lot of social media and have extensive information on the website. We plan to get out as much as we can in person, obviously taking current restrictions into play, and we'll also be sending out a lot of information to households. And if you just scroll down to the next slide, you can see our high-level communication timeframes with some of our sort of milestones for communications. We plan to do sort of a soft launch in autumn, so that's when we'll be going out and just sort of having a lot of engagement face-to-face as much as possible. And then we plan to start sending information to households in early January, so there's not too much time between sending out that information and sort of containers arriving on doorsteps.
Thank you, Natalie. Chairman, I think I'm going to wrap up there. If members look at the final slide at their leisure, which is about the member resources, that is important. I'll just really, before we take the questions, want to stress that this is a good news story. It is a pity it didn't come in September. We are providing an improved recycling service to the public. We're going to introduce a weekly food waste collection, and we are going to bring ourselves into line with the rest of Devon. It is very important for the reputation of this council that it is successful, and for that we need enormous member support. So thank you, Chairman. There was a list of questions. Are you going to?
Okay, yes, I'll go through them. Councillor Baldry, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Rose, you have a question. Councillor Rose.
Sorry about that. I was just switching through screens to try and get to the mute button. The question that I have regards to disposable gloves and masks, which obviously are going to be a pretty big waste issue as we go forward. The two elements to my question. The first one is, what messaging are we giving to the public to try to ensure that they're disposing of them safely? So obviously not just leaving them around. And I've also been having a kind of steady stream of emails from my constituents talking, just basically saying, you know, is there any kind of recycling option? And I've done a little bit of research, and there is one company called TerraCycle based in the UK who are actually recycling single-use gloves and masks. So I'm wondering if there's any way that this council could team up with them. And obviously I know that there's a contamination issue if we're handling these gloves. However, I'm interested if there's some kind of creative solution here, if people can bag them up in sealable bags, or if this has been considered at all in this from the waste team. Thank you.
Councillor Baldry. Councillor Baldry, would you like to answer that, or Jane, are you able to answer that, please?
Yeah.
Sorry, John, I haven't switched the microphone back on. I shall leave it on now till the end. I'm going to say it is a very good question from Councillor Rose, and I'm sure Jane wants to answer it.
So there has been some government guidance come out very recently about disposal of these particular items. If they and the guidance really is alongside existing guidance. So if the PPE is potentially contaminated, so if it's come from a source where they suspected COVID, then it should be treated like other waste in heavily contaminated waste in that way, in which case it needs to be double bagged and kept for 72 hours before it's put out, and we then dispose of it. If it's not considered to be infectious, then it can be put out with ordinary waste. What it can't be done at the moment, and this is in general, notwithstanding what Councillor Rose has just said, what we can't do is take it in our recycling for the moment. I am aware of the organisation TerraCycle. I think if we were to set that up at this stage, though, I think it would be quite challenging for the contractor to be able to pick this type of waste up, not knowing whether it's contaminated or not. So I would heed against that. However, I've just had a message from Natalie saying we did send out some social media that I wasn't aware of yesterday. Natalie, can you pick up the social media side of it, please?
Yeah, just to quickly say, it's either gone out yesterday or it's scheduled in to go out over the next few days, because new government guidance has been issued about the disposal of the single-use masks and gloves. So we put out something on our social media linking back to that, and the central government guidance does not recommend recycling and said it should be put in the disposal. However, there's also not the requirement to bag it and keep it aside as there was a few months ago.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just very quickly come back on that and just say, is it possible that we can link people to TerraCycle in our messaging, even so if we're not actually directly handling it in our messaging? Obviously, we're going to be asking people to dispose of it safely. Can we also be linking people to this organisation who's recycling it? Obviously, we also have our, climate and biodiversity strategy, and obviously we're trying to reduce waste, and this is going to become quite a major waste issue. So just wondering if in our messaging we are able to link people to that website.
Do you want me to come back on that one?
Yes.
Shall I answer that?
Yeah, you answer that, please.
I do get a little bit nervous when we link directly to another organisation without doing a due diligence on the background, etc., and what happens to the items. I'm quite happy for us to put out something generic that says there are organisations that take this type of material. So I'm happy to signpost but not endorse.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Great news. Endorse Councillor Baldry's comments entirely about what a good news story this is, and the reputational benefits to the council. My question is about service delivery, and although it is now it will be increasingly relevant as we go through the new bringing service online. My question really is, when it comes to having TUPE'd staff over to the service provider, how are we working with the service provider to ensure that operational staff are on message, and that will become very relevant under the new set of circumstances? I've had situations recently where local people in my ward have been told by FCC staff when they've had any issues, we don't work for the council, it's not our problem. Now, quite apart from the fact that I don't agree with that, my concern therefore is that if we're having these sorts of issues now, when we bring a new system online in March and there are necessary confusions, teething problems that you would expect with any new system, are FCC staff going to be properly briefed to make sure that there's a degree of sympathetic understanding and help given to residents? Because it would be it would be very damaging potentially for a good news story to be wrecked because people don't understand the system and are told by FCC, we don't work for the council, it's not our problem.
Thank you, Dan. I'm aware of the particular case you said, but I shall give the high-level answer and let Jane do the answer further down. Of course, these staff are paid via Southampton's taxpayers, and they will be aware that they are the front line of Southampton, and I'm sure Jane is going to take up the particular matter of somebody, member of staff, who wasn't not aware of that. And yes, the staff will be fully made aware and trained in how to operate the new service. Jane.
Yeah, so I've seen that particular message as well, which was a little bit concerning. So we'll be taking it up with the contractor formally, but they're also the contractor staff are signed up to a code of conduct. So we will be reminding them of that code of conduct as well. They'll be addressing it through toolbox talks. So that's a talk before they go out in the morning for the crews. So we'll ensure that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, can I just come back and say, you know, the reason for the comment was obviously, as I said, things are going to get more difficult potentially for the frontline staff, and their job is difficult already. But if we bring a new system in, they're going to need to be even more softly, because clearly we're going to have day-to-day problems with a new system being embedded.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, I agree with that, but also, Chairman, to point out, of course, that FCC have for some years been operating a similar curbside collection system in West Devon. So FCC at the higher level are fully aware of what is required. It is not new to them.
Thank you. Councillor Pannell.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions. One very quick and specific. First is I put all my bottles in all the bottles I think are appropriate in the appropriate bag, the appropriate sack. Are we supposed to put lids on the bottles or not? I've never been sure of that.
Simple answer, yes.
Thank you.
No, you're not. Sorry, sorry, Jane, to interrupt. What council panel are they supposed to put lids on the bottle? If they don't put the lid on the bottle, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but it is a lot. Excuse me. It is a lot easier at the moment. What we say is, if you put the lid on the bottle, for a plastic bottle, you can get more bottles in because you squash it and then put the lid back on. So that's what we try to tell members of the public, because then you can get more recycling, we can get more on the vehicles, makes the collections more efficient. It is a different type of plastic usually, so it does get taken apart again when it gets to the end reprocessor. But yes, our advice is to put the lid back onto the bottle. But if you don't,
we could put all the bottles in and then throw the lids in separately.
We could, but what we'll end up with in the new service is when the loads are taken out at the depot, then you can imagine there's lots of lids then get left on the floor, and that's a sweeping process. So it's actually more efficient if they are put back onto the bottles.
Thank you for that. And the second and more general point, I think I get more in my year and a bit as a councillor. I think I've had more interaction with members of the public over waste collection than any other single issue, including planning. So it rather reinforces the point that one member made, that we seem to be a waste collection service who does a bit of planning on the side. In view of the fact that we do get often queries, complaints, issues raised with us, I don't want to have to sort of come back to Jane every time that we got a specific issue. Will there be a point of contact, whether it's localities or somebody from the waste team, not too high a level. Obviously, we don't want to be, taking up all your time, but a point of contact where we can come to raise issues over specific problems that members of the public have had.
Yes, and traditionally we do it through localities. Please do.
Well, I recognise that, but
or email off to waste management.
May I just add to that as well? Yes. What we try to encourage members of the public to do is to report online, because by doing that, the information goes straight to where it's needed, but it also helps us to keep those reports. We've got the records then of it happening. Quite often when issues are reported to us, we might not be in that day. It can take days. We'll end up with lots of different people looking at the same issue. It's far quicker. So we have a report it function on the website. We also have a generic waste email, which is, we can send this round afterwards, which goes straight to our case managers, but also localities pick up a lot of that case management work as well. So there's three clear channels there. We prefer the report it one because it's much cleaner, but we recognise that sometimes an issue might be going on, and then it needs escalating.
That's the sort of problem I'm thinking of, something that goes on for months and it doesn't get resolved.
Chairman, this gives me the opportunity just to say that for the next few months, Jane and Natalie are doing nearly all the work and introducing a new service. They are fully stretched. They will be unable to deal as quickly as they used to in the past with day-to-day operational issues. So please, if possible, as Councillor Panel has suggested, avoid going via them.
Okay, can we move on? I've got quite a lot of members wanting to ask questions. I don't want to spend all morning on this, so could we move on to Councillor O'Callaghan? Can you please keep your questions or comments brief, please?
Thanks. Yeah, my questions have really been answered, but just quickly, I see.
If the question's been answered, can I move on?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reeve.
Yes, thank you. Can I just confirm then that when I said bottles, actually it was the lids. So we know now that the lids and the bottles can go together, and that the only plastic that can't go in is the black plastic. So that can be collected and taken to the recycle centre, is that right?
That is when the new service comes in, Helen.
Yes, that's right. And what about crisp packets? Just I've got this sustainable Black Autumn, and they're very hot on all this, and they've been taking stuff that can't go in people's own rubbish bins. They're collecting it at the shop, and then they're having volunteers that are taking it to the recycling centre. So is it just going to be black plastic and crisp packets that won't be accepted?
Jane?
If I can have a chance to answer that. So we'll be telling what can be accepted rather than what can't be accepted, because we can't be too prescriptive. So what will be accepted in terms of plastic will be bottles, pots, tubs, trays and printer cartridges. We won't be collecting things like crisp packets or wraps, and that's because they're extremely difficult to recycle and there's a high cost. But again, Councillor Rose mentioned TerraCycle. I know TerraCycle do recycle things like crisp packets, and before COVID, there was boxes in each supermarket collecting those type of items. So we'll be telling members of the public exactly what we can take in our collections. The reason that we haven't gone full out and said, no, we'll accept everything is because the markets are so difficult for these items. And it comes back to, well, where exactly are they being reprocessed? What exactly is happening to them at the end of that market? We are guaranteed, we know what happens to our recycling. And I think we have to ensure that we've got a duty of care to the public to make sure we recycle what we say we're going to recycle. So that's why we've designed the service in the way we have. But yeah,
that's really good, but it just really needs to be made clear, because I think they do get confused. They think, should this be going in or should? Yeah. So as long as it's really clear, I think they're going to be more than happy to to do it the way that they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the next is a question from Councillor Jackson. Says, will locality officers be involved in communicating new waste strategies? Yes. The answer to that is yes, as I understand it.
Yes, good, thanks. And forget the second bit because that's already been sort of covered. Thanks.
Okay, right. Moving down, Councillor Smurden, I note a rounds review is planned for the autumn. Will all members have input into this?
It depends what you mean, Councillor Smurden, by members having input. The detailed working out of the round review will be done, but if members have a comment they want to make, that will be welcome and received. But I'm not absolutely sure what you mean by members having an input.
Would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, you know, well, I guess what I was meaning was, will members have sight of it before it's implemented? You know, so that I mean, I'm sure, you know, that you know, the officers and etc. and FCC staff who are going to work this out. You know, I suspect we'd probably like to know the rationale behind, you know, why things have changed, why they've had, you know, etc. etc. Obviously, the critical thing is going to be the fact when if people's collection days change, because you know, that's when ward members on the ground are going to need you know, are going to need prior warning to this.
Yeah, of course, and that's what will happen. But if you're talking about members having an input in what order the round is and whether we start in one street and finish in another, I don't think that will be particularly valuable. But of course, members need to be told all the changes and in particular the days of collection when they change. Yes, we would like members to actually be our ambassadors on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hallway.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just to ask if the collection pattern on unadopted and private lanes is going to change from what it used to be.
I will give you the brief answer. This was adopted at council policy. It arose in part because the occupants of an unadopted private road threatened to sue the council because they alleged that our dust cart had damaged the verge for which, in a private road, they were responsible for the upkeep of. I think I would like to see us strengthening the policy. For example, if you've got a barn conversion down the end of a track with 4 or 5 barn conversions, for them to bring their bins to the end of the road. What won't change is assisted collections will continue to take place, but we are not changing what is already approved policy. Am I right, Jane?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yes. So yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sweet.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, another great thing. This is really good. Thanks, Jane and Keith and the Waste Working Group and everybody that's you know, inputted this. I was also going to, you know, query about black plastic, because I you know, agree with Helen, that does need to be really clear. I think the black plastic thing, I don't know what the levels of contamination are, but I think it is quite confusing, and especially that one. So I don't know if that can be looked at again. I know I did raise that at the working group last time.
Thank you, Joan. The problem with black plastic, as you know, is the supermarkets and other meat producers like the black plastic, so that the public who are squeamish don't actually see the blood there. The problem with black plastic, there is nowhere to get rid of it, as far as I understand it. Nobody is interested.
It's carbon, isn't it? And there's like a carbon pigment.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, I think your question's been answered.
Can I ask my second thing?
Okay.
Yeah, well, just that there's information. I'm agreeing with Helen that there needs to be information. Don't put, you know, plastics except black, because people chuck flower pots in as well, don't they, as well as the meat wrappers. But my second thing was, you know, this has gone a little bit quiet through the lockdown, but when can we look at recycling on curbside collections? Because that's the one that I get just so many comments and so many emails about. Can we start to look at that through next year?
Joe, it was in the papers. It's all in the slides. That is what we are going to be doing from in March, when we introduce the new service. It will be curbside collection of things like glass and batteries and things we haven't collected in the past, but they will be collected at the curbside.
Sorry, Keith, I meant curbside as in, you know, waste bins, public waste bins in public places. Sorry.
Sorry.
That's all right. I'm sorry.
What? Repeat the question then, and I shall try and give you total attention.
Make the question clear, Councillor Sweet. So please.
My question is, can we look at recycling stations in public places, public bins, South Hams public bins,
Okay.
in the public realm.
Councillor Baldry.
No.
No.
Thanks.
The officers will be more tactful than me. Do they want to give a tactful answer?
I think that's something that we could raise through the waste working group. I would be loath to divert resources right now, and we do know that the majority of those type of bins don't actually work. We have got them in a neighbouring authority, and they are so heavily contaminated because once one side gets full, the other side tends to fill up. But I know there are new types of bins now where they look more like a recycling bank, so they are much more, the return on those is much better, and we can certainly look at that through the waste working group. But could I just ask that we perhaps put that off till after next March?
Yeah, as I said, next year. I'll
thank you.
bring it up next
Okay, so
year.
Councillor Sweet, I need to move on.
But we will continue, sorry, Chairman.
I think the question's been answered. The question's been answered. If I could move on to Councillor Chan, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I completely agree with the previous councillor comments about how I think many members of the public are confused about what can and can't be recycled. And I would say bringing in this new service is a really good chance to reset and make it really clear. So can I suggest two things? Is one, if we're going to be delivering, I think we're going to be delivering new bins to all the residents, can we just include a leaflet that's really simple and gives all the information that people need, and also our messaging on social media as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Natalie, one for you.
Yes, just to confirm, as well as an initial mail drop prior to the boxes and sacks being delivered, there will be a leaflet that is sent along with the boxes and sacks to every household.
Thank you.
So there's a comment from Councillor Rose. Instead of a leaflet, can it be printed on the bins or as well? Would you like to answer that?
We tend not to do that just in case we ever get in a position where we need to change what goes in the boxes. We are planning to issue stickers with the leaflet, sorry, I should have mentioned that before, that will be placed on the boxes so that residents can see what goes in them. But in terms of printing on the boxes, because they stay around for quite a few years, if we were to ever not be able to collect something or add something new, that reduces our flexibility.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Right, I think I've come to the end of the comments.
Can I ask a question? I've waited patiently till the end.
Oh, please. Sorry, Councillor Pennington, but you're sorry. Sorry. Would you like to ask the question then, please?
Yes, please.
Yes, answer if you'd like to ask the question or make a comment.
Well, I think it was an excellent report anyway. I congratulate the team on that. But my question is with regards to cost. And it's where you state that it's stated that the worst case scenario could cost £325,000 for a 5-month delay, but you hope to get this figure down to £200,000. I'm sure you will be trying very hard. Could I have some information as to any possibility of how you can do this, please? And also, I would like this particular section on cost to a report to go before the South Hams Council Audit Committee.
Right,
Cost is important.
Yeah, I can't answer the second point. On the question of, we are reasonably confident now that the additional cost, and I have to stress it, is additional cost simply because of the delayed implementation because of COVID. We are hopeful that some of that money, if not all of it, we're asking for to come back from government where we're claiming for costs of COVID. It is going to be round about £209,000. The largest element of that, I think I'm right in saying, is the additional cost of having to run for all those extra months. We're still producing the plastic sacks for people to put paper and plastics into, and that is a significant cost. And yes, Councillor Pennington, if you would like to contact the Chairman of Audit and ask for it to be put on the committee, I'm sure it will be considered.
I think it will be helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
you very much. Thank you. So we've come to the end of comments and questions. There isn't a recommendation on the paper, so I'd like to propose from the chair the following recommendation. It reads as follows: the overview and scrutiny panel thanks the officers for the presentation and briefing note reporting on the delay to the new recycling service. I'd like to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder on that?
Second, Chairman. That paper's forward.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just repeat that. The ONS panel thanks the officers for the presentation and briefing note reporting on the delay to the new recycling service. Are there any members who do not agree with that or would like to vote against it? No. Darryl, is that agreed?
That's agreed, Chair. There's no one. There's no dissenting voice on the communication chat. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. That's been a very useful session.
Thank you, Councillor Baldry, and thanks, Jane and the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. If we can move on to item 9, which is the ICT update. Members will be aware that Appendix A is an exempt report. If there are any questions or comments on Appendix A, then we would need to divide the agenda. I'd like to propose from the chair that if there is any member wishes to comment or raise a question on Appendix A, then they take that up directly with Mr. Ward, rather than us having to divide the agenda. Is there any member who disagrees with that approach? No. In that case, if we move to Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your suggestion on Appendix A, which is a sensible way to go. This IT update, the recommendation, which is it's a noting report, is to assure the overview and scrutiny group that the IT practice is continually improving IT security and infrastructure in an effort to ensure the organisation has the most appropriate and reliable platforms for maximising service delivery. This is evidence in the success of the move to home working and remote meetings due to the COVID-19 outbreak. The findings of a number of security assessments and audits and almost continuous availability to the business of IT services. Looking forward, the implementation of new platforms such as the NetCore low-code solution and Northgate Assure and Microsoft Teams will give the Council the best possible service and opportunities in the future. If there are any questions on the report, Chairman, I'd welcome them.
Thank you. If I have got some questions at 3.5 of the report, it makes reference to the Teams, the introduction of Teams, and also at 3.6 makes reference to the introduction or the of Office 365. Will there be an opportunity for members to be acquainted with this and receive training prior to it being implemented?
Yeah, we can arrange that. Can be arranged, Chairman. We can arrange a training day for both these. Yes. Okay.
And on 4.1, it talked about the number of members within the team. How many members of staff are within the IT practice team?
Sorry?
Mr. Ward, can you answer that one, please?
Morning, everyone. Morning, members. 12, including myself.
And at the moment, are they all working from home or are they working within the office? What's the situation?
They're all working from home. Use the office by exception. So if we receive a new piece of hardware that needs mounting in the server room, then someone will go in and do that. But generally, we can work at home just as easily as everyone else.
Right, because there seems to be a lot happening at the moment, so it is working out with people working from home.
Yes, yeah, we're not seeing any impact of all of us working from home long term on the service delivery or the implementation of the FIT project.
Right, thank you. There's a question from Councillor Panel.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This refers just specifically really to members. A couple of issues. I think many members share the same problems I have, that if we receive anything on our devices at home, we have to forward it to our own private email address to be able to print it. Is there anything that can be done to resolve that so we can print directly? I understand that the security system actually stops us doing that. And the other thing is the weekly members update. I find it very hard to manipulate, or in fact to capture the text in that blue boxing that comes in the members update, and sometimes it would be very useful to be able to manipulate that and adapt it and send it on to other people such as parish and town councils. Can we have a look at that and see whether that could be the format slightly altered so that we can manipulate that text?
Okay, Councillor Powell, I'm not sure whether that's a question for me or for Leslie in comms, but between the two of us, perhaps we can discuss that.
Chairman, that was actually came out of a workshop yesterday. Councillor Panel raised exactly the same question, and Miss Leslie Crocker was in that meeting, and she's going to take that one up as an action. With regards to the printer, I can print from home, so I'm not too sure. Maybe it's something that needs adjusting in your settings.
Other members can't do the same as me when I've discussed it.
Policy-wise, I'll address that one. Policy-wise, there's no objection to members printing from home. What we do by default is to block the USB ports on the devices, so that we've got control over what gets plugged in and what, say for example, data sticks and cameras and so on. So what we do is if you plug in a USB printer, it will notify our security, and then we can enable that device to communicate with that printer.
Thank you.
So from that perspective, there is no problem. And as someone's pointed out in the conversation, Wi-Fi printing shouldn't be a problem. So if you can't print, contact the service desk and they'll sort you out.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, Councillor Mackay.
Yes, it's around the whole security thing and Pulse. I mean, I know that I'm not alone in struggling with Pulse, and I believe there was a brief look at this by Councillor Hopworth, and I don't know quite where that went, but my perception is it seems to be getting worse and not better, and my Surface Go struggles to connect sometimes for ages, and I have to restart it basically. I mean, restarting it sorts it out. So yeah. I just don't understand why that problem arises so often. And I know that I've raised it. This is a second question, really, which I know what the answer is going to be. But in managing emails, I forward virtually everything that is of interest to my private computer in order to deal with it, because it's a much more easier environment to work in, and then I send it back to this device and then send it off. I don't really understand why we can't auto forward these things. Yeah, I realise that there's exempt material sometimes in these emails, but it's very easy to just forward those as well and to get it off ModGov and just forward it. I'd be more than happy to sign an NDA to say that I will treat this stuff with due care and not give it to anybody else. It would make life so much easier. And I suspect I'm going to be told, no, this can't be done, but I really don't understand why.
It can't be done because it's a requirement of the issuing of our PSN connection certificate that this auto forwarding is specifically forbidden. So one of the reasons would be you could receive an email regarding a vulnerable adult or a safeguarding issue, which you've auto forwarded to your uncontrolled email. And it wouldn't be good practice then to allow that kind of information to leave the network or to leave our control. So whilst we appreciate that it is,
but it is possible,
a little bit of inconvenient, but it is,
as long as one is managing it correctly and you're aware of what's happening, then I can't see that there's a particular issue or anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's no allowance for exceptions in that.
In the end, I would make the point that, I mean, I've worked in lots of secure environments. I mean, I've worked for hedge funds, who are the most paranoid people on the planet, and I've also worked in defence. And never should security really impinge on it's there to protect an organisation. Where an organisation has to work around the security, then there's something wrong, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is a government environment now. We're subject to the rules that are imposed on us. Whilst I appreciate security should be transparent, and we make it as transparent as we can, there are some things that are imposed on us, and that there is no real leeway on.
I think, Councillor Mackay, I think that your question's been answered. If I could move on now to Councillor Smurden.
Very quickly, Chairman, I don't know whether members experienced connection problems this morning. I mean, I don't normally have connect, but it was very slow. The whole thing was very slow to do it this morning. But I appreciate I can probably sort this out outside the meeting, and I'm happy to do so. But my device is currently saying that it's missing important updates. I can't make it. And it also says that some settings are managed by your organisation. Your device is missing important security and quality fixes. I don't know whether other people are suffering from that. Maybe a bit of advice on that, please.
So, really, the updates will get applied whenever you shut down and restart the device. And I would always recommend, perhaps at the end of the day, shutting down the device and then restarting it the following day. That will clear any issues that you have with Pulse. It'll apply any updates. It'll keep the machine secure. And whilst I realise it seems like an imposition, at the end of the day, we chose Windows over Apple and iOS, but because it's far more flexible. But it's not. I don't see it as a 24/7 operating system like iOS is designed to be. It's more of a 9 till 5 operating system. So if you bear that in mind and shut down your Surface Go at the end of the day rather than sleep it, I think a lot of these issues that you've seen with Pulse and reminders for updates will disappear.
Yeah. So what you're saying is we effectively shut it off rather than just closing it down. Closing the lid, which in layman's terms, to most of us, means that it's shut off. What we actually need to do is to go to the the button in the far left hand corner and close it right down.
That may just sleep it. You just need to go to the Windows logo in the bottom left-hand corner and choose shut down.
Right. Okay. Right.
So, and I think officers probably aren't affected so much because they're using laptops rather than tablets. And I think the usage pattern with tablets is to tend to sleep them, whereas with laptops, officers tend to shut them down at the end of the day.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So there's a comment there from Councillor Baldry, and then Mr. Molyneux, you have a comment.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of observations, really. First, if only we had the IT budgets of hedge funds and defence contractors, then I'm sure we could make security completely invisible. So that's the first point. The second point as well is that so probably 2 administrations ago, members weren't really given IT. They were allowed to choose their own IT. So that whole issue of members having the flexibility to choose the devices they use. But what actually happened, and the reason we went away from that, is we were then in effect supporting 31 members different pieces of IT equipment, because actually members were still having issues and there was an expectation that it was a cancelled problem and therefore we'd have to resolve it. So the reality of going to a use your own device scenario is it probably increases the workload of the IT team and increases the complexity, because they're having to try and solve problems on potentially 31 different pieces of equipment. So the reason we sort of stuck with the standardization model is it makes it much easier to support. So just make those observations. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. So there's a comment there from Councillor O'Callaghan and also one from Councillor Pannell. Unless I have any further comments or questions, I propose we move to deal with the recommendation that's on the screen. So I'd like to propose the recommendation that's on the screen. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, second, Chairman.
Okay. Are there any members who oppose the recommendation or would like to make a comment on the recommendation? No. So I'll take it that that recommendation is agreed. Is that okay, Darryl?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Okay. So next we move on to item 10, which is the overview and scrutiny annual report. The report is before members. I've given an introduction, as I don't think there's any need for me to repeat that. Darryl, do you want to add anything to this at all by way of the Constitution, etc.?
Nothing really, Chair. I need to reinforce that it is a constitutional requirement that we report on, in effect, what the panel was up to in its previous year. And probably the only other comment I make is, as you said at the very start of the meeting, it does feel like that was in a wholly different world. But other than that, no, nothing to add, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Could I just repeat what I said in the beginning of the report, that I do thank all members and our officers for all the contributions they made, and it is appreciated. And once again, I thank both officers and members. So do we have any comments or questions? There's none in the chat box at the moment. No? Oh yes, a comment. Councillor Pannell.
Yeah, just to say thank you for the work that you and the members of the committee do, because not being a member of the committee, obviously there are certain things that we're not so involved with, and it's impressive to see how many issues that you've dealt with over the past year, and I do appreciate the opportunity to attend and ask questions and get very prompt and explicit replies when we have an issue that we wish to raise. So I'd just like to thank you for the work that you all do.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. There is mention of the task and finish group on localities in this report. Is now the time to question how that might look moving forward, or would that be better left to item 12?
No, can we deal with that at item 11, please?
11. No problem at all. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions or comments? Right, if that's the case, then we'll move to the recommendation.
Can I make a comment, John? Sorry. I just wanted to say well done for chairing, especially through this COVID time. It can't be easy online, and especially the big epic one we had in June. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sweet. Thank you.
Echo those words from Joe Sweet. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so the recommendation is on the screen. I propose from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Again, are there any members who are not happy with that recommendation? Wish to? No. So do we all? I presume we all agree then. Is that agreed? Okay. So, Darryl, is that okay?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Chair. Just for those viewing the stream, Chair, there's no one wishing to vote against that recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, if we could move on to item 11, which is the task and finish group update. First of all, we could deal with the locality services, and I'll hand over to Councillor Thomas to give an update on that and the way forward.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of localities, clearly events with COVID have overtaken us. We were due to conclude our report, having met officers back in February, March time, and the final report was due to come to ONS in April. I would like to propose, assuming I have the support of other members of Task and Finish, that we really need to hold off for now, because clearly it's been stated by officers on SLT and indeed on ELT that localities will be central to the recovery plan, and as such it would seem prudent that we hold off until the recovery plan becomes properly operational, and at that point the Task and Finish can re-meet and can work with officers and with the executive portfolio holder and almost not start again, but look at the new normal and how the landscape looks, and talk to officers and the executive portfolio holder as to the intentions for the way forward.
Thank you. Can one of the officers please give some indication as to when the recovery plan is going to be in its final stages, and that then consideration can be given to this task and finish group resuming its duties? Drew, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and I welcome the comment from Councillor Thomas. I think that's entirely appropriate. I mean, as members know, the draft recovery plan is due to come to members of ONS on the 3rd of September, and then on to executive 2 weeks after that. I think at this stage, we are still distilling the ideas that have come out of the workshops. Clearly, the localities and the links to community cluster groups is something that has been emerging. So I'd consider that, moving that work forward will happen sooner rather than later. I wouldn't want to give a time at this moment because obviously we're still developing the plan, but we don't have to wait until everything's finalised in the plan to start to progress some of the work. But I would say it would be too early at this stage to give a specific date.
Thank you, Drew. Councillor Thomas, in our work programme, we have task and finish group updates in the meeting on the 8th of October. I'd like to suggest that we review the position at our meeting on the 8th of October. And in other words, your proposal will be that the work of the localities task and finish group be put on hold and be reviewed at the meeting of the panel on the 8th of October. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, Chairman, thank you very much. That would seem to make perfect sense.
Yeah, Chairman, sorry, can I just, is there sort of have we got mechanisms in place that, like information and stuff which comes out over that period will be captured so that, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't know whether Drew's got any advice on that, or yeah, I'm just trying to ensure that things which have happened and will still happen up to the course of that October review, are captured for the task and finish group to take on in their work.
Well, could I suggest that if there are any matters that Drew believes that should involve or information passed to Councillor Thomas as chair of that task and finish group, that he do that. There will not be time or room within the agenda for the meeting in September because there's some two hefty pieces of work to deal with there. So I think the first opportunity will be in October.
Mr. Chairman, can I just comment? I mean, Councillor Smurden is, of course, entirely right. I suppose my stance is that I don't want to put undue pressure on officers, but he is quite right. At the same time, you know, if there are being plans made that will help the recovery process that circle around localities, I've got no doubt that Mr. Powell will be in contact.
Great,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. Yep.
I've got Councillor Austin wants to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to second the proposal that was put forward by Councillor Thomas. I do think that it's a good idea to leave it until October and then make a decision. But I think when we get to, you know, October, what we do have to do is we have to come up with some dates going forward where we wrap it up, because we do actually have to get to the point where the task and finish group finishes. And so when we get to October, I think we probably want to be looking at, you know, wrapping the whole thing up within a few months, really, and coming to some conclusion at that point.
Councillor Austin, I agree entirely. I mean, that's, I think, why it's called the task and finish group, because it needs to finish, so it needs to have a date for completing its work. So I think, you know, that the giveaway is in the name. So there is this proposal then that the work of the localities and localities task and finish group be put on hold and be reviewed at the meeting, and its position be reviewed at the meeting of the panel in October. Is that agreed? I think that's proposed by Councillor Thomas and seconded by Councillor Austin. Have I got the wording right, gentlemen?
Yeah, yes, I'd be happy with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
So are there any members who'd like to speak for or against that? Well, I think it's clear. Does anybody disagree with that? No. So I think that's the panel has agreed that. Is that acceptable, Darryl?
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Chair. And that moves us nicely on to the annual work programme. So that'll obviously be an additional line.
No, I haven't finished yet. I haven't finished with task and finish.
Okay.
Members will be aware that there have been exchanges between myself and Councillor Pearce on the need for a consultation and engagement strategy, and what has been proposed is that the panel set up a task and finish group and it be tasked with producing a draft consultation and engagement strategy for the executive and the council to consider. So the first proposal, before I move on to the membership of that group, is that I wish to propose that we set up a task and finish group to draw up or develop a consultation and engagement strategy for the council, and that its task be complete before Christmas of this year. So I'd like to propose that from the chair. Councillor Pearce, you want to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, I've been in and out of this meeting because I've been having IT problems. I'd just like to suggest to you, Chairman, that you don't have to have just overview and scrutiny panel members on your panel for this. So you could choose other members of the council to join it if you so wanted. It's entirely up to you, but I'm just mentioning that.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, then, can I ask members of the panel, I'm proposing that we set up this task and finish group. Do I have a seconder for that proposal?
Yes, I'll second that, Chairman.
Well, thank you, Councillor Smurden. Are there any members who oppose that or wish to speak on that? No. Okay, I think that is agreed. Darryl, do you accept that is agreed?
Thank you, Chair. That proposal is agreed. I've just slightly reworded your initial thing to make it clear that because the last panel meeting of this calendar year is the 19th of November, that in effect the outcome report will be presented to that meeting, Chair.
Yes, okay, yeah. Is that acceptable to all? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, if I could now turn to membership of the Task and Finish group. I have had an exchange of emails with Councillor Smurden on this, and we have a proposal to put to the panel, and we propose that there be 6 members of the Task and Finish group, and that they consist of Councillor Thomas, Councillor Rose, Councillor Reeve, Councillor Spencer and Councillor Chown, plus myself. So first of all, it's being proposed that the chair of the Task and Finish group be Councillor Rose. Can I also say that as I currently sit on the Localities Task and Finish group, I am standing down from that group, and I'm proposing that in respect of my replacement, that be Councillor Jackson. So first of all, could I ask those members the names I've just read out, if they're willing to serve on the Task and Finish group? So if I could start with Councillor Thomas, are you willing to, you've said yes. Councillor Rose, are you willing to serve on the Task and Finish group?
Yes, very happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reeve?
Yes, happy to.
Councillor Spencer?
Yes, happy to.
Thank you. And Councillor Chown?
It would be dependent on my availability, Chair.
So can we put you down at the moment, and then if you are not available, then a replacement be found?
Yeah, if you could send me dates, and then I can look into it.
Thank you. So,
Chairman, just wondering if Councillor Chown was was struggling with dates, etc., whether that would be an opportunity to involve a member from outside the ONS panel, as suggested by Councillor.
Well, let us. What I would like to suggest is let's see if there is a problem, then that problem be addressed in discussions between you and I, and then we could put a proposal to the group.
John, could I quickly comment there, please?
Yes.
Just to say that, I mean, I'm very happy to chair this group, and if that is the case, then very happy to chat with you, Matthew, as well. And I'm sure if you've got a very busy schedule, we can work around your availability as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joseph.
Right. So there is a proposal then before the panel that I've named the 6 members. They've all accepted. They've all accepted. It's proposed that Councillor Rose be the chair. Can I have a seconder, please?
Yes, second that, Chairman. Can you just remind me of its actual title? The Task and Finish.
It's the consultation and engagement strategy Task and Finish group.
Right. Fine.
Okay. So, are there any members who wish to speak on that proposal or object to it?
Sorry, John, there's just a comment from Denise there about, have you asked Councillor Jackson?
Well, of course I have, yes. Yeah, I'm going to move on to that in a moment as to the locality. If I could just deal with the Task and Finish group in respect of the consultation engagement, and then I'll move on to localities.
I think you need to confirm it with her. I think you did everyone but her.
I spoke to her yesterday evening. She told me yes. Councillor Jackson, would you like to confirm to the meeting that you're prepared to sit on localities, please? Councillor Jackson, yes, she is. Yes, okay. So the proposal, first of all, is the membership on new Task and Finish group, together with the appointment of Councillor Rose as chair. Do we all agree that? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Darryl, is that acceptable?
That's acceptable and carried. Thank you, Chair.
Right. As to the localities, then, that Councillor Jackson sit in my place on the localities Task and Finish group. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes, second, Chairman.
And I can confirm that I will.
Yes. Okay. Right. Do we all agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Do we take that as accepted, Darryl?
Thank you, Chair. That is carried. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. If we can now move on to the last item on the agenda, which is the annual ONS work programme. You'll see that there is a joint meeting. There was a joint meeting on the 3rd of September, which deals with the two main topics. There are the recovery and renewal plan, and that will be a major piece of work that will take quite a while to deal with, and then that will be followed by the amended budget. And so it's being proposed at the moment that the recovery and renewal plan be dealt with during the morning, and the amended budget during the afternoon session. And then the rest are set out the programme for until February. And then there are some notes at the bottom, items to be considered for scheduling. That needs to be fitted into the programme. Are there any questions or comments?
Chair, would it be helpful if I just reflected the three updates from this morning's meeting?
Yes, okay.
So we'll factor in the plan on the basis of what's happened in the last couple of hours. The update on the wholly owned company. Now, if the meeting's happy, I mean, there's a natural synergy with the housing strategy update at the 8th of October. Yes. So if that goes to the 8th of October, as with the update in the locality service task and finish group to that meeting, and then the 19th of November will be the outcome report of the consultation and engagement strategy task and finish group.
Yes, yes, that's fine. Do we all agree?
Yes, happy with that.
Right, so I'm proposing that the annual work programme as set out in the paper with the additions mentioned by Darryl be accepted. I propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Right. Are there any members wish to speak or wish to vote against? No. Okay, I think that's accepted. Is that acceptable, Darryl?
That's acceptable, thank you, Chair. And of course, the programme evolves over the course of the year anyway, so it's not just a reinforcement. It's not set in stone now for the rest of the year. It will evolve as the year goes on. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right, that is the end of the meeting. Thank you very much indeed, members, and look forward to seeing you this afternoon.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.